He pointed. On a very slowly moving band, a rack full of test tubes was entering a large metal box. Another rackful was emerging. Machinery faintly purred. It took 8 minutes for the tubes to go through, he told them. 8 minutes of hard x rays, being about as much as an egg can stand. A few died. Of the rest, the least susceptible divided into two. Most put out 4 buds, some 8. All were returned to the incubators, where the buds began to develop, then after 2 days were suddenly chilled and checked. 2, 4, 8, the buds in their turn budded, and having budded were dosed almost to death with alcohol, consequently burgeoned again, and having budded, bud out of bud, were thereafter. Further arrest, being generally fatal, left to develop in peace, by which time the original egg was in a fair way a prodigious improvement, you will agree, on nature. Identical twins, but not in piddling twos and threes as in the old viviparous days, when an egg would sometimes accidentally divide, actually by dozens, by scores at a time. Scores, the director repeated, and flung out his arms as though he were distributing largesse. Scores! But one of the students was fool enough to ask where the advantage lay. My good boy, the director wheeled sharply round on him, can't you see? Can't you see? He raised a hand. His expression was solemn. Volkanovsky's process is one of the major instruments of social stability. Major instruments of social stability. Standard men and women in uniform batches, the whole of a small factory staffed with the products of a single Volkanovskified egg. 96 identical twins working 96 identical machines. The voice was almost tremulous with enthusiasm. You really know where you are for the first time in history, he quoted the planetary motto. Community, identity, stability. Grand words. If we could Volkanovskify indefinitely, the whole problem would be solved. Solved by standard gammas, unvarying deltas, uniform epsilons, millions of identical twins, the principles of mass production at last applied to biology. But alas, the director shook his head. We can't Volkanovskify indefinitely. 96 seemed to be the limit, 72 a good average. From the same ovary and with gametes of the same male to manufacture as many batches of identical twins as possible, that was the best, sadly, a second best that they could do. And even that was difficult. For in nature, it takes 30 years for 200 eggs to reach maturity. But our business is to stabilize the population at this moment, here and now. Dribbling out twins over a quarter of a century, what would be the use of that? Obviously, to no obviously no use at all. But Podsnap's technique had immensely accelerated the process of ripening. They could make sure of at least 150 mature eggs within 2 years, fertilize and Volcanovskify, in other words, multiply this by 72, and you get an average of nearly 11,000 brothers and sisters in 150 batches of identical twins, all within 2 years of the same age. And in exceptional cases, we can make one over yield as over 15,000 adult individuals. Beckoning to a fair-haired, ruddy young man who happened to be passing at the moment. "Mr. Foster," he called. The ruddy young man approached. "Can you tell us the record for a single ovary, Mr. Foster?" 16,012 in the center, Mr. Foster replied, without hesitation. He spoke very quickly, had a vivacious blue eye, and took an evident pleasure in quoting figures. 16,012 in 189 batches of identicals. But of course, they've done much better, he rattled on. In some of the tropical centers, Singapore has often produced over 16,500, and Mombasa has actually touched the 17,000 mark. But then they have unfair advantages. You just see the way a Negro ovary responds to pituitary. It's quite astonishing when you're used to working with European material. Still, he added with a laugh, but the light of a combat was in his eyes and the lift of his chin was challenging. Still, we mean to beat them if we can. I'm working on a wonderful Delta minus ovary at this moment, only just 18 months old, over 12,700 children already, either decanted or in embryo, and still going strong. We'll beat them yet. "That's the spirit I like!" cried the doctor, and clapped Mr. Foster on the shoulder. "Come along with us and give these boys the benefit of your expert knowledge." Mr. Foster smiled modestly. With pleasure, they went. In the bottling room, all was harmonious bustle and ordered activity. Flaps of fresh sow's peritoneum ready cut to the proper size came shooting up in little lifts from the organ store in the sub-basement. Whiz and then click. The lift hatches flew open. The bottle liner had only to reach out a hand, take the flap, insert, smooth down, and before the lined bottle had time to travel out of reach along the endless band, whiz click, another flap of peritoneum had shot up from the depths, ready to be slipped into yet another bottle, and next of that slow, interminable procession on the band. Next to the liner stood the matriculators. The procession advanced one by one. The eggs were transferred from their test tubes to the larger containers. Deftly, the peritoneal lining was slit, the morula dropped into place, the saline solution poured in, and already the bottle had passed. And it was the turn of the labelers. Hereditary date of fertilizers, membership of Volkanovsky group, details were transferred from test tubes to bottle. No longer anonymous, but named, identified, the procession marched slowly on through an opening in the wall, slowly on into the social predestination room.